All right, so this is going to be the first podcast for Unit 7, which is on inequalities. So this first part is just a quick little warm-up, just to kind of, connect this back to older material. So the warm-up review, number 1 says graph each number on the same number line. This is actually pretty important for the warm-up. You'll see why later in the chapter. So if we graph each of these numbers, so this first number is negative 1.25. That is the same as negative 1 1/4, okay, 1 1/4. So if we graph that, we got to go negative 1, and we have to go 0.25 or a quarter more. That's halfway between the half, right? So it's not exact, but it should be pretty close, less than halfway. All right, so that is where negative 1.25 is located, right there. Okay. Now 3.5, that's positive. That's the same thing as 3.5. So that would be at 1, 2, 3, and then we got to go 0.5 or a half more. So that would be directly in the middle of 3 and 4. Okay, so that is 3.5. 1.75, that is the same thing as 1 3/4. Okay, so that's past a half. It's past a half but before 2. So we go positive 1, half, and then a quarter more, so it's between the middle and 2. So just get as close as possible. That is our 1.75. And last one, D is negative 0.5. That's the same thing as negative half. So if I start at 0, I got to go in the negative direction, but hopefully you recognize half is not enough to be 1. It's halfway between 0 and 1. So that number would be right there. There is our negative 0.5. Okay? And the important point that we're trying to make here is that this point is one answer. This point is one answer. 1 point being one answer. Okay? And the reason why that's important is on inequalities, you're going to need a point to show where inequality starts. But in this case, there will be more than one answer. Okay? But essentially, a colored in dot means that's the answer. Okay? Now, this next part of the warm-up is just solving equations. The reason why this is important is because we're going to solve inequalities, and solving inequalities is the exact same almost as solving an equation. So if we just remind ourselves how to do this, it'll make solving inequalities much easier. So what I want you to do now is to pause the podcast, solve all 6 of these, and then when you unpause it, the answers will be here for you to check. Okay, so go ahead and pause now, and then work these 6 out. All right, so here are the 6 answers for these equations. Hopefully you got them right. If you got any of these wrong and you're doing them on your own, mark it, and then come see me in class so we can go over any mistakes. Okay? All right, so if we scroll down, so here is a review of the inequality signs. You probably remember this from when you were younger, but just to refresh our memories, when the arrow is pointing to the left, this now represents less than. Okay? All right, so that's the less than. When the arrow is pointing to the right, greater than. And then when it's pointing to the left and has half of an equal sign, well, that has 2 meanings. It's not just less than, it's less than or equal to. And then when it's going this way with half an equal sign, greater than or equal to. Okay, so we'll squeeze that down here. Greater than or equal to. All right, now remember, when you're on a number line, because we're going to be graphing our answers on a number line, when you go in this direction, that's the same thing as going greater. And you'll notice, look at the greater than signs. They point to the right. And when you go to the right, it's the same thing as greater than. Okay, so that's a shortcut you can use. You color in the direction of the arrow. When you're going left on a number line, you're getting smaller or less than. Less than arrows point left, so when you go left, you're getting less. Okay, or lesser, however you want to say it. All right, so first thing we want to do is just make sure we can read these inequalities and translate them. Okay, now the important thing to remember is you are going to read left to right, just like you read English. Okay, so for this first one, we have 4. This is less than 5. So if we just translate it back to English from math, we say 4 is less than 5. Okay, that's the proper way to read it. Okay, and that makes sense because 4 is less than 5. If we said 4 is greater than 5, that wouldn't make sense. Now look, it's flipped. Now the 5 is first. So now we're going to say 5 is, oh, it's pointing that way now. 5 is greater than 4. Okay, and once again, that makes sense as well. Okay, all right, so now we have x. Okay, so x, usually when we say x, that means a number, right? So we can say here a number is, the sign's going left, left and less, both start with L. A number is less than or equal to 5. So if you think about that, what could that mean an answer is? It could be 4, 3, 2, 1, or even 5 because it can be equal to 5, right? Anything that or less than. And now we have y, so we can say now it's a number. Now it's a number greater than or equal, because it's got half the equal sign under it, to 2. Alright, so that's how we translate it. Okay, just practicing reading it left to right, getting comfortable with these signs. Okay? Alright, so the second page, or on the back of the first page, I should say, this is now about graphing inequalities. Okay? So this kind of goes back to the warm-up. Remember in the warm-up when we were graphing 1 point, that 1 point was the answer. Now we're going to have a point, and we're going to have to indicate all the answers less than or greater than as well. Okay? So this first one, x is less than 3. That means our number is any number less than 3. So when you have a regular less than or equal to sign, we use an open circle because the x or the answer includes all numbers less than 3. 3 is not included. The answer does not include 3. X is everything less than 3. Alright, so remember on the warm-up, you colored those dots in because that number was the answer. Here, 3 is not an answer. So it's an open circle because it's saying this is not included. But it's everything less than. So once again, here's the way you check it. The arrow is pointing to the left. You color to the left. You're coloring in the same direction as the arrow. So this shows you x is anything less than 3. 2, 1, 0, negative 1, negative 2, etc. Okay? So a regular sign, open circle, because it does not include that. Okay? Now let's try another one. Here we have x is greater than negative 2. So you're going to put your circle on the negative 2, but it's going to be an open circle again because it doesn't equal negative 2. It's everything greater than. So look, the arrow goes that way. We're going to color that way where the numbers are greater. So what's greater than negative 2? We could have negative 1, 0, 1, 2, even what's in between, 2.5, 3.5, anything at all. Okay? Now, the other thing you'll see, so now when you have your less than and equal to or greater than or equal to, now we use a closed circle. Not an open circle, a closed circle. Now, because your answer includes that it's equal to that number. Okay, so it's not just greater than or less than, it also equals it, so that has to be colored in. Anything colored is an answer. So if x is less than or equal to 1, go to 1, and we're going to put a closed circle because that equals 1. 1 is an answer, and then you color left for less. So here this means the answer could be 1, could be 0, negative 1, or anything less than, or equal to that. Now we have x is greater than or equal to 0. So go to your number, go to 0. Because it can equal 0, closed circle, because 0 is one of the answers. It could be 0 or anything greater, so we color to the right. Okay? Alright, so what I want you to do here is try these 4. The thing to pay attention to is, is it going to be an open circle or closed circle, and color in the direction of the arrow. That's a quick way to check it. Okay? So you're going to pause the podcast. I want you to do these 4, and on the next page, 5 through 12. Okay? These are just doing what you did but backwards. Before they gave you the inequality and you graphed it, now they gave you the graph and you write the inequality. So I'll show you how to do one of these real quick. So start off with your inequality or your variable. So we have x. Okay? Now, look at where the dot is. The dot is on 1. Now let's fill in our sign. Okay? Is the graph going left or right? It's going right. It's going greater. We're going to use this. But now look at the circle. It's a closed circle. That means it also equals this. So you're just going to fill that in. X is greater than or equal to 1. Okay? So pause it, do 1 through 4, and then 5 through 12. Unpause it, and then check your answers. Alright, so take a look at the answers for the first 4. Once again, pay attention to the direction and closed circle versus open circle. Remember, it's only closed if it also equals that as well. Open means it's not equal to that number. Okay? Now, the second page, when you went backwards from the graph, and you had to write the inequality itself now. Alright, so from, let me shrink this down a little bit. So from 6 to 12, here are the answers. Okay? Now, for the most part, these are pretty straight up. Once again, you got to look at the dot. Closed circle means it's also equal to. Open circle means it's just greater than or equal to. Once again, use the direction they're coloring. Use the arrow that points that same way. Okay? Now, there's two we want to talk about here. They threw two curveballs at you here. Number 10 and 11. Alright, now look at the graph for number 10. Okay, after you've checked all these. Now, number 10, you'll notice the arrow's going greater and less than. That basically means it's every number, all real numbers. But you'll also notice there's an open circle here. So basically it means x is everything less than or greater than, basically everything in the world except that. And that number is, that open circle is on -2. So basically it means x is everything except -2. X does not equal -2. Okay? And now this one, look, they just give you one dot. That means there's just one answer. That means your variable x equals 10. That's the only thing it can equal. Alright, so they just threw those in there, mixed them up. See if you can figure that out while you're thinking it through. Okay? Alright, so let's hop to the next page here. So this next page is a little more practice on translating. Okay? Just want to illustrate a couple points with you here. So on these first two, we'll do these together, and then I'll let you go off on your own here. Alright, so we're going to translate. So it's in words, we're going to make it to math. It says all numbers, remember, that's your variable, n, x, whatever you want to use. Here's my symbol. Whoops. It's not just less than. And in this case, don't get this confused. The common mistake is people say the less than, and they treat it like subtraction like before. Well, now it's less than or equal to, so now it's the inequality sign. 5. So here's my inequality. N is less than or equal to 5. So I go to 5. I'm going to put a closed circle because it's also equal to that. And I'm going to color left because it's everything less than that. Okay? Just that easy. Okay? Now one thing I want to show you is this here, and we'll talk about this more again later. But now look, 3 is first, is less than. Okay? Now once again, to help you differentiate, like this one didn't say it. But remember is used to mean equals? Well, now it's not equals, but it means some kind of equality sign. So when you hear is less than, that doesn't mean subtract. It means your equality sign, but you're going to use less than. Some number. So look, if I do it like this, that's not wrong, that's right. But that's going to be hard to graph. It's much easier to graph when the variable is on the left. Okay? Because that trick where you color the direction of the arrow, it doesn't work when it's backwards. It only works the other way. So if I use my property of symmetry and I flip the sides, I'm going to put n on this side, I'm going to put 3 on this side. But I can't change the meaning. So look, the mouth, remember people say treat this like a mouth and it eats the bigger number? Right now the mouth is eating the n. When I flip it, the mouth has to eat the n. I have to flip the sign as well. Now this is going to be easier to graph. Now I go to 3 and I put an open circle because it's only greater than, it's not equal to. And then I color that way. Okay? So anytime the variable's on the right side, flip it and flip the sign. It makes it much easier, okay? So pause the podcast, do the remaining 4, and then check your answer. All right, so here's the answer for the next 4. All right, number 3 was pretty straight up. Number 4 was pretty straight up. Now, they didn't have the graph big enough. We can just extend it to 9 and then color it there. Now, number 5, hopefully remembered, when you translated it, hopefully you flipped it so the variable's on the left. When you do that, it's going to go color to the left. And once again, we had to extend our graph. It wasn't big enough. And number 6 was definitely not big enough because we had to graph it from -10. But there it is. Okay? So translating it, the variable's on the wrong side, flip it. Okay? All right, one more piece with the translating. Okay? Now, instead of just doing the regular translating, now we're kind of looking at real-life situations. Okay? But it's the same thing. All right? So what they want you to do here is first define the variable, meaning think about what the variable stands for, and then still use it to write the inequality. Okay? So number 7, this example says Amy would like at least 4 people to come to the movies with her. Okay? Actually, before we do that, they're going to introduce 2 new words to us that mean either greater than or less than. Okay? So the 2 words that we need to look at are at least and at most. Okay? So the word at least, what that means is, think about it, if I told you I have at least $10 in my pocket, if I have at least $10 in my pocket, then that means I could have $10. I could have 11, 12, 13, 14. So at least means greater than or equal to. Okay? Because you have that much or more. Equal to or greater. The opposite of that would be at most. So if I said I have at most $10 in my pocket, that means the most I could have is 10 or anything less, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, etc. So that would be less than or equal to. Okay, so write that down. At least is greater than or equal to. At most is less than or equal to. Okay? All right, so now back to the problem with Amy. Amy would like at least 4 people to come to the movies with her. So we're going to use a variable, but what does the variable stand for? In this case, we're talking about the number of people. Okay, we'll just shorten it, but the number of people she wants to go to the movies with her. But in this case, it represents the number of people. So if we write this, Amy would like, so I'll use n this time. This represents the number of people. She wants the number of people in the movies with her to be at least 4. That means we're going to use 4 as the number, but we want this to be at least 4. That means greater than or equal to 4. That means she wants 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. Okay? All right. Do one more together. Number 8. Ike was thinking of a number that was larger than 2. So, in this case, our variable is going to stand for the number that he, meaning Ike, the number he's thinking, right? We're trying to guess the number in his head. So in this case, I'll even use an I for Ike. So we'll say in this case, he's thinking of a number larger than 2. Larger means greater than. So in this case, it'll be I is greater than 2. The number he's thinking is greater than 2. So it could be 3, 4, 5, etc. Okay? All right, so last part of this podcast, pause it here, and then check your answers here. All right, so picking up here at 9. Now, once again, you could have worded it slightly different, okay? But this is what your inequality should be. Whatever letter you chose is greater than or equal to 15. Once again, here's that number at least. That means he wants 15 or more. So it has to equal 15 or anything greater. All right, this one's a little tricky. Mary wants no more than 50 cookies. So that means 50 is the most she wants. No more than that. So that means it's your variable. She wants less than or equal to 50. 50 is okay to bring to a party, but 50 or 49, 48 or less. Okay? Now Adam's thinking of a number. So the current year is 2013. So it's a variable. It has to be larger, which means greater than the year, which is 2013. And last, Joy thought she could make a better grade than Tim. So her score, the variable, has to be greater than 68. Doesn't want to equal. That would be a tie. She wants to get better, so greater. Okay? And then just a couple quick checkup questions. Once again, you might have worded it a little different. But 13 says, explain the difference between using a filled circle, which is a solid dot, and an unfilled or open circle. I just put the solid circle means that number is a solution too, right? When you color it, it means that number is an answer too. This means it's not an answer. 14, explain the difference between using this symbol and this symbol. I just said this symbol means just greater. This one means greater or equal. Okay? All right, that's the end of the first podcast for this unit.